श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad-gurubhyo namaha, Asmad-paramagurubhyo namaha, Asmad-sarvagurubhyo namaha. So we're continuing our discussion of Sri Vacana Bhusanam by Pillai Lokacharya with a commentary by Manavala Mahamudi. We're going to start Sutra number 93.
ஆழ்வார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், எம்பெருமானார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், பிள்ளை லோகாச்சாரியர் திருவடிகளே சரணம், ஜீயர் திருவடிகளே சரணம். Sri Vacana Bhusanam, 93rd Sutram. In the previous few Sutrams, Pillai Lokacharya and Manavala Mamunigal talked about certain activities that were done, particularly by Tiruvangiyalvar and by Andal. Examples were given, where they adopted things like doing madal and doing vrata, manmata vrata, in order to reach Sriman Narayana. And the question naturally arises, they are adopting means that are different than Lord Sriman Narayana, and some explanations were given in the previous two sutras. In this sutra, Pillai Lokacharya and Manavala Mamunigal explained to us very clearly about the nature of those activities and how they are not to be considered as against the upaya of Lord Sriman Narayana. Let us see how. The sutram is as follows. Sadhya samanam vilamba asaham ennire sadhanathukku ettam. Sadhya pravanyamadiyahavire sadhanathil izhigiradu. It's a very terse sutram. I will do a direct translation first and then explain. The direct translation is as follows. The greatness of a means, a sadhana, are two things. Sadhya samanam, the quality of the goal itself as being the means, and vilamba asaham, and the quality of that means to not bear any delay in giving fruits. Those are the two qualities. The second half of the sutram is, these sadhanas are these things that were done were basically because they were caused by the infinite affection that was present towards the goal to be achieved, which is Lord Sriman Narayana. Now in this sutra, there are two key concepts that are explained. The activities like doing madal and doing vrata are not pratibandhakas. They are not in opposition to, they are not obstructions to Lord Sriman Narayana giving fruit. That is the second concept that is explained. The first concept that is explained in the Vacana of Manavala Mamunigal is that these two, doing madal and doing vrata, they are very similar to, and in fact they are almost equivalent to Lord Sriman Narayana as the upaya itself, equivalent to the Siddhopaya. Let us see how. First, let's look at the two concepts. What makes a specific upaya or a specific means great? There are two things. One is sadhya samanam. If the goal itself is the same as the means that one needs to adopt to reach the goal, that is one greatness. And the second one is the quality of not bearing any delay in giving fruits. Those are the two qualities. Now these two are there in Lord Sriman Narayana. When we adopt Lord Sriman Narayana as the means, we adopt him as the means in order to achieve the goal of doing kainkarya at his feet. So the goal and the means are the same. Now we also know that if we adopt Lord Sriman Narayana as the means, he will quickly give us the fruit. Lord Varadaraja told Tirukachinambi, Dehavasane moksham. So you will get moksha, release, as soon as your soul leaves the body. That is at the end of this life. Whereas if somebody adopts karma yoga or jnana yoga or bhakti yoga, they may take hundreds of births or thousands of births before they may give fruit. Hence, for Lord Sriman Narayana, those two qualities are there. Now, the same two qualities are present for these two activities of Madal and the Vrata. Activities similar to them. These two are examples. Activities similar to them. They all have these two same qualities. How? Let us see. When somebody is adopting doing Madal as an activity, what does it entail? It entails thinking about, talking about the person that they want to achieve. That is Lord Sriman Narayana, and then doing some things that will hopefully get them closer to Lord Sriman Narayana or get Lord Sriman Narayana to come and take them as soon as possible. So, in the process of doing this, they are thinking about Lord Sriman Narayana and they are talking about the qualities of Lord Sriman Narayana to anybody who comes across. So, when somebody is seeing a person doing a madal, they are naturally wondering, oh, this person is undertaking this really hard means to reach that person, and they are talking about the person that they want to achieve. So, how great that person is, how great that person should be, that these people are adopting this difficult means. And hence, this basically is adding glory to the greatness of Lord Sriman Narayana, because more people now get to see and understand the greatness of Lord Sriman Narayana that prompts these people to adopt those means. And in some of these means, they may talk about Lord Sriman Narayana directly also, which adds to the glory for Lord Sriman Narayana, because others get to hear Lord Sriman Narayana's qualities. This is no different than Kainkaryam. What is Kainkaryam? Kainkaryam is doing things that bring good to the person that we are serving. That is the goal, isn't it? The goal is to attain Lord Sriman Narayana and do Kainkaryam. But these means that are being adopted, they are adding glory to Lord Sriman Narayana here itself. And hence they are equivalent to Kainkaryam that one is wanting to do after reaching Lord Sriman Narayana. Hence, this is the same as sadhyam. This is the same as the goal to be achieved. The goal to be achieved is to do Kainkaryam to Lord Sriman Narayana. What they are doing here is bringing glory to Lord Sriman Narayana, and hence it is Kainkaryam. It brings happiness to Lord Sriman Narayana, and hence it is the same. Hence, these are sadhya samanam. Now, the next thing is that Lord Sriman Narayana, on seeing these people do these things, he immediately thinks, oh, these people are doing this for my sake. They have so much affection towards me that they are unable to bear any separation from me. Then he comes running and then he tries to help them immediately. Hence, these means also have the quality of providing fruit soon, providing fruit immediately, not waiting for multiple births or long times. So, the practices, the things that were told, like doing madal and doing vrata, they also have the two qualities of sadhya samanam and vilamba asaham. And hence, we can say that these are equivalent to the Siddhopaya. These are very similar to adopting Lord Sriman Narayana as the means. That also has the same two qualities. This also has the same two qualities. And hence we can say that these are very similar. Is the first concept that is being taught here. Now the second concept is that these, even though they are not directly adopting Lord Sriman Narayana as the means, we should not think that they will obstruct Lord Sriman Narayana giving us fruit. Now here again, sadhya samanam, the means itself as the goal itself as the means, is explained beautifully using a real world example. Imagine somebody who is having some stomach problem. What they want to accomplish, the goal that they have is for that problem to go away. The options that they have are two. One is they can take some medicine. The medicine could be very bitter. While eating the medicine, they may not be happy. In fact, they may be suffering while taking that because it is so bitter. But it will cure them. The other option they may have is that they can drink milk. That milk also will cure them. Now here, the goal is the same. They will attain the same thing. But while drinking milk, milk is sweet. The person likes milk. They are very happy to drink milk. So the means also is bhogyam, is also very enjoyable, as opposed to the medicine. Now we can think of karma, jnana and bhakti yogas as means like that to be equivalent to the medicine. While doing, it is very difficult. It could be difficult, it could be bitter. Because even to do karma yoga, one has to gather the material to do the karmas. To gather the material, one has to earn money. One may have to do things that they do not like to actually to earn money to gather the material and do the karma, isn't it? But if one adopts Lord Sriman Narayana, then they are thinking about Lord Sriman Narayana all the time, and hence it is enjoyable even while adopting the means. That is the example given. The milk example is given. Now, we also know that Lord Sriman Narayana is somebody who does not bear waiting to give fruit. These two qualities of being enjoyable while being adopted as a means and not wanting to delay giving the fruit, these two actually give us a lot more affection towards Lord Sriman Narayana. When we look at something and when we see these two qualities, it allows us to develop even more love and even more affection towards that object. In this case, it is Lord Sriman Narayana. So it's kind of interesting that the pravanyam, the infinite affection towards Lord Sriman Narayana that is displayed, gets reinforced because of these two qualities. And because of this reinforcement, the pravanyam and which is the love and affection deepens, and it reaches a point where these people are completely immersed in it. They become ecstatic. They think about Lord Sriman Narayana all the time, and they cannot bear separation from him even for a minute. And in that, they adopt means like taking like doing madal and doing the vrata, so that they can reach Lord Sriman Narayana soon. Now, on seeing this, what will Lord Sriman Narayana do? Will he say, no, I am not going to help them because they adopted a different means other than me? No, he is not going to say that. On looking at this, Lord Sriman Narayana will be very moved. Because of their affection for me, they are doing these things. Because of the affection that they have and the inability to bear separation from me, they are adopting these means. Let me go and help them immediately. So, in fact, it may even accelerate Lord Sriman Narayana and coming and giving fruits, as opposed to being a pratibandhaka or opposed to being an obstruction. So, it is explained that these activities like madal and like vrata, in opposition to being an obstruction, in fact, they are not an obstruction, they may accelerate the fruit, is what is explained. So, those are the two concepts that are explained. The first concept is these activities have equivalence to taking Lord Sriman Narayana as the goal, and these activities are not obstructions for Lord Sriman Narayana giving the fruit. Now, in the past few sutras, starting from the Vrittanta or the story of Pillai Tirunarayur Arayar, where he gave up his body to save Vedanarayana Perumal, Pillai Lokacharya teaches us a few things. First, he talks about how the activity that Pillai Tirunarayur Arayar did is not a upaya, is not a means to attain moksha. He did it because of his concern for Vedanarayana Perumal and to try to save him. It came because of his affection towards him. So it doesn't belong in the category of a means that he adopted to attain moksha. Hypothetically, if we say that no, it is still a means because he did that activity, even then it does not have any defect because it came from Bhakti Paravasya. It did not come because Pillai Tirunarayur Arayar thought that this is a means that I want to adopt to get to moksha. But on the other hand, it came because of his deep bhakti towards Lord Sriman Narayana, and it automatically came in that ecstatic state. And hence we cannot consider that to be a means. And the previous few sutras gave examples of where people knowingly adopted those means to reach Lord Sriman Narayana, and even if they adopted them knowingly, like doing madal or doing vrata, they cannot be taken as obstacles because of the explanations that were given before. Primarily because it comes because of the prema, out of the affection and love that they have to Lord Sriman Narayana. That is what has been explained in the previous few sutras.
So he means that even if you take up some means, but if the intention is to connect with Sriman Narayana, then it's okay, actually.
Well, the example he gives is there's two examples: the Madhul and the Vratam. The Gopikas did a Vratam where they worship Goddess Katyayani to get Krishna as their husband. That's a Vratam. That's
Yes.
a vow. Madhul, the idea of Madhul is it's a typical. The thing about the word Madhul refers to when somebody's in love with somebody else, but they want to get their attention. And in Tamil culture, what they do is they get a banana tree. They get a banana tree and they sit on the banana tree and they ride it around town like a horse. And the idea is to get. It's such an absurd sort of thing that they're trying to get attention, right? So the example given by this person who saved the deity, he and his two sons, I believe, they died trying to save the deity by grabbing hold of the deity when the deity of this Virnarayana Perumal in another place called Melkote. No, excuse me, not Melkote. Another place called Tirunarayanapuram. So there was another place called Tirunarayanapuram. Usually Tirunarayanapuram refers to Melkote in Karnataka. But this Tirunarayanapuram place, the other one, they had a deity and the temple burned up. Somehow or other, the temple was made of flammable materials, and the temple burned up, and the deity was being burned. And out of love, these people embraced the deity, trying to save the deity, and thus gave up their lives. So what the two examples that are being specifically given is out of love, if you do something, if you adopt some other means out of love. We can't say the gopis they didn't attain Krishna, or this person who gave up his life didn't attain Krishna, or this person or a person riding around on a banana tree like a horse won't attain Krishna. We say these are all not adopting the Lord directly as the means. These are different than adopting the Lord as the means, because number one, the gopis are adopting a vrata, worshipping Goddess Katyayani. That's different, and they're worshipping some other deity to get Krishna. So that's really different. And then giving up your life is not usually, something which is recommended that people should do to attain moksha. And thirdly, I mean, just trying to get God's attention by what? By going around doing something to get his attention, maybe sinning, or maybe doing some other great works of devotion, or whatever you're doing. But the point really is the mentality. The point is, what is the mentality of the person? If the person doesn't really have any love for God and he's adopting some other means, right?
Yeah.
I don't really have love for God, but I'm adopting some other means. I'm a Vaidhi, in Gaudiya terms, I'm Vaidhi Bhakta, and I'm adopting some other means to attain God. That's just Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, an ordinary Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. And that may take many lives. But if you actually out of love, you're doing something crazy to get God's attention, or you love him so much that you're going to worship the Goddess Katyayani, or you're going to give up your life because to save him in his deity form because the temple's burning down. If that is done out of love, in other words, if it's in Gaudiya terms, if it's a Raganuga thing that you're doing, right? Then another means the other means doesn't obstruct you attaining the goal immediately or very very quickly, because it's the mentality which is important. It's the mentality which is important. So if you have deep of devotion, I mean, who does? I mean, I don't. I'm not saying that I do or other people do, but if somebody does, like the gopis, let's say, right? They had this deep devotion for Krishna, so they went and they worshipped a demigod, a demigoddess, to get Krishna as their husband, to attain Krishna. So somebody will say, well, they adopted a means which was not Krishna. Therefore it's just it's like ordinary people worshipping the goddess and asking for some benediction. But it's not true, because of their mentality, their deep devotion to God. That makes the difference. So, because previously what was being said in Sri Vacana Bhusanam was it was saying you should not adopt any goal, and if you not adopt any means other than the Lord. Even property, they say, don't adopt property. Even property is not a means. The Lord himself is the means, right? And you should not adopt any other means. So here's an exception. This is an exception. This exception is if you have intense devotion for the Lord and you have that feeling, then you can adopt any means.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it still works the same as property. But it's not to be confused that we think that we can maybe do that. You know, maybe we should go and worship Goddess Katyayani or embrace a deity and give up our life or any of these things and ride around on a palm tree horse. You know, do something to attract his attention when we don't have that love. You know, if we're not sure about it, then probably we should not try to adopt these extraordinary means. These extraordinary means. So that's what this is about. This 93rd Sutra is about extraordinary examples of people adopting extraordinary means, and that those means are also accepted. But I think we could say they're a little bit exceptional. They're exceptional.
ஆழ்வார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், எம்பெருமானார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், பிள்ளைலோகாச்சாரியர் திருவடிகளே சரணம், ஜீயர் திருவடிகளே சரணம். Srivacana Bhusanam, 94th Sutram. In the previous Sutram, we learnt from Pillailokacharyar and Manavala Mamunigal about the Pravanyam, the infinite affection, the extreme affection and desire that one has for the Supreme Lord, for Lord Sriman Narayana. Of course, we also learnt that Pravanyam causes one to do many things in their extreme desire to reach Lord Sriman Narayana. In this Sutram, Pillailokacharyar teaches us a very important concept in this and the next few Sutrams. We know that there are gunas called Atma Gunas, qualities that we have to develop that will enable us to improve our knowledge and that will enable us to lead a proper spiritual life and go on the path towards liberation. For that, we need to develop a bunch of gunas called as Atma Gunas. In this sutra, Pillailokacharyar tells us that even these Atma Gunas that one has to develop, it is caused, one of the key causes for the Atma Guna is this Pravanyam, this love towards Lord Sriman Narayana. How? We will see in a second. The Sutram here. இவனுக்கு பிறக்கும் ஆத்மகுணங்கள் எல்லாவற்றுக்கும் பிரதான ஹேத்து இந்த பிராவண்யம். The root cause of the birth of all the Atma Gunas for a surrendered person is this pravanyam, this love and affection towards Lord Sriman Narayana. Now, when one thinks of the Atma Gunas, they generally are things like Shama, Dama, which is control of internal senses, control of external sense organs. Krishna tells in much more detail in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he talks about Kshetra and Kshetrajna. So, Shama, Dama, etc., which is internal sense organ control, external sense organ control. And I will spend a few minutes talking about what Krishna tells us in the 13th chapter. These are some of the Atma Gunas. Amanitvam, Adambitvam, Ahimsa, Shantihi, Arjavam, Acharyopasanam, Saucham, Stairyam, Atma Vinigraha, Indriyarteshu Vairagyam, Anahankare evacha, Jamma Mrityujara Vyadi Dukkha Doshanur Darsanam. So this is only the 7th and 8th shloka of the 13th chapter. In 9th shloka also he says, in 10th shloka also he says, and 11th shloka also he says. He gives more Atma Gunas. Let us see some of them just to get an idea of what these are. Adambitvam. Adambitvam is a beautiful concept. Damba is the quality of practicing some good things, of doing dharma because one wants to get some fame or one wants to get some return out of it. If, for example, one helps somebody by giving them money, which is dana, if one is helping them not because of their genuine desire to help them only, but they expect something in return, they expect that the receiving person will praise the giving person, or they expect some fame out of it. That kind of mindset is called damba. That we should not have. That is adambitvam. That is one quality, atma quality, that one should have. Ahimsa, we all understand it to be non-violence. Immediately we think it's physical non-violence. That is not complete. Ramanuja beautifully defines that. Ahimsa is vangmanakkayahi parapida rahitatvam. Towards others, one should not have violence in the mind, violence in the words, as well as physical violence. Which means that one should not even think that bad things to come to others. One should not even think of imposing some harm on others. One should not speak of those kinds of things. And of course, one should not do that. That is the full definition for ahimsa. Kshantihi is ability to bear. Paraihi pidhyamanasyapi tan prati avikrita chittatvam. So even if somebody does some harm to us, our mind should not change towards the other person. We should not start hating them. We should not start wanting harm to come to them. That is called kshantihi. This is another atma guna. Arjavam is a beautiful arvaguna. Arjavam, in general, we think of it as the congruence of what we think and what we say and what we do. Clearly, what we think is what we should say, and what we say is what we should do. We should not think one thing, do another thing, and say something else. But Ramanuja again beautifully defines this. Arjavan is paran prati vangmanakkaya vrittinam ekarupata. He says the congruence of the thought, words and action, it is paran prati. Even towards others it should be that way. It is very easy for us, for our own things, to have congruence. I think I want this, we can say I want this, and then we do some work to want that. But paran prati, towards others also we should have. We should not think bad of somebody and then praise them. Right? That is the meaning of arjavam. Like that, there are many atmagunas. You can refer to Bhagavad Gita. This is chapter 13, slokas 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. Beautifully Krishna explains. In fact, in the 11th shloka, Krishna even says, Ete jnanamiti proktam ajnanam yatato anyatha. So this is the true knowledge. Everything else is not the true knowledge when it comes to the science of spirituality. He says that very clearly. So these are all gunas, or qualities that one has to develop in the mindset as well as in practice, that will enable us to go on the path of spirituality. Now normally when one thinks of atmagunas, people think that atmagunas are developed through hard work, through following of scriptures, through reading scriptures, learning scriptures and following scriptures. That may be true. But here, Pullalokacharya very clearly says that the pradhana hetu, the primary cause for developing these atmagunas is not the study of the scriptures and following that. It is the love that one has towards Lord Sriman Narayana. Ivanakku piratkum atmagunangal ellavattukkum pradhana hetu in the pravanyam. If one has that love and affection towards Lord Sriman Narayana, then all these atmagunas will automatically develop. That is the root cause, is what he says in this sutram. In the next sutram, the 95th sutram, he gives examples, clear proof that this is the case. We will see what it is. 95th sutram. Marpal manam sulippa, paramatmani yo raktaha, kandu ketuttu mondu. These are three words that he uses. Each one of these is a part of a pramana, part of a proof. First, let's see each one of them one by one. Marpal manam sulippa is from Moondran Tiruvandadi of Peyalvar. So here he very clearly says, Marpal manam sulippa mangayar tol kaivittu, Nurpal manam vaikka noividam, Narpala vedattan, Vengadattan, Vinnor muditoyum, Padattan, Padam panindu. That is the pasuram there. This is the first line of the pasuram, is quoted as the pramana. Marpal manam sulippa, mangayar tol kaivittu. Mal is the Tamil name for Vishnu. Mal, Tirumal is Perumal. Marpal, towards Vishnu, manam sulippa, if one's mind goes towards Vishnu and is immersed completely in it, mangayar tol kaivittu, then one will actually leave the company of women, it says, but in general this means one will leave the mindset for wanting to have material things. And then Nulpal manam vaikka noividam, then our mind will go towards the Vedic literature. Nool basically is Vedas or the Divya Prabandham or Vedic literature, we can say. How do we attain this? Narpala Vedattan, Vengadattan, Vinnor Muditoyum, Padattan, Padam Panindu. When we worship the lotus feet and surrender to the lotus feet of Vengadattan of Lord Srinivasa, then Marpal Manam Surippa Mangayar Tol Kaivittu. Then our mind will develop affection towards him. Marpal Manam Surippa. Because of that, all our material desires will go away and our mind will go more deeper into the Vedic literature that talks about Lord Sriman Narayana. This is what Moonram Tiruvandari, which is Peyalvar, says that. The second pramana that is given basically comes from a Samhita, which is Paramatmani Yorakto Virakto Aparamatmani. Yeah, this basically says one who has virakta, one who has an aversion and non-desire towards anything that is not the Supreme Being, a Paramatmani Viraktaha, and Paramatmani Yorakto has desire and liking and wanting for the Supreme Being. It very clearly says that. The third pramana that is given is from Thiruvaimozhi. Kandu Ketuttu Mondu is the word that is given from the Pasuram. And this Pasuram is beautiful. This is from the Nannadar Muruvalippa Thiruvaimozhi. And the Pasuram is Kandu Ketuttu Mondunduralum Ainkarivi Kanda Inbam Thiruvari Alavilla Chittinbam Undodial Thirumagalum Niyume Nila Nirpa Kanda Sadir Kandohinden Adainden Un Thiruvadiye. Beautifully Nammalvar says here. He says, Undodial Thirumagalum Niyume Nila Nirpa. You and Pirati, Periya Pirati, and Periya Pirati who has beautiful bangles on her hand. So Lakshmi, Goddess Lakshmi and you are together. When you are together, seeing that beauty, Kandasadir, Nilanirpa Kandasadir, I saw the beauty, and then once I did that, what happened was Kandu, Ketu, Uttu, Mondu, Undu Udalum, Aimkarivi Kanda Inbam. So all the pleasures that I got through the five senses of seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and eating, all the pleasures, material pleasures that I get, as well as Thiruvariya Alavilla Chittinbam, as well as the Kaivalya, which is the permanent state of being enjoying the soul itself, which is not an optimal state. All these, Urinden, I lost all these things. Adainden un Thiruvadiye, then I got your lotus feet. So the moment Alvar is saying that on seeing Perumal and Pirati together, due to the love that he has for them, the things that he lost were the material pleasures and even the state of Kaivalya, which is permanent Atmanubhava. So these are three examples that are given. Of course, there are a lot more things in the scriptures that are similar to this, but Pillai Lokacharya picks these three and Manavala Mamunival explained it to us to convey to us that there is clear proof that the love and affection that one has towards Lord Sriman Narayana is one of the key causes for us to develop the Atma Gunas, the good qualities of the mind and the soul that is needed for us to live a good life and follow a good spiritual path. From tomorrow, we will see even more detail as to how these get developed. Alvaram Perumanar Jiyar Thiruvadigale Sharanam.
Okay, so that's Sutra 94 and 95. This is sort of ending up this particular section about spontaneous devotion.
So he is explaining that when you develop love for Perumal, then you develop automatically these Atma Gunas.
Right.
That's clear, huh? You don't need to. That's the best way to develop these Atma Gunas. Huh? Then spontaneously you develop them, and that's a better way than to follow the scriptures, to based on the scriptures and everything.
Yeah,
that's correct, huh?
But I mean, you know, how do you develop love?
By worshiping the deity, and
well,
mantra.
Okay, the examples, the examples given. Well, first of all, he's saying, okay, so we should look at these qualities. I posted the qualities in the chat from the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which comes after. What's the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita? 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is Bhakti Yoga,
Bhakti Yoga,
The
yeah.
Lord Krishna's already explained. He's explained Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. After he explains Bhakti Yoga, then the 13th chapter is called Chetra Gya Yoga, right? Which comes from the first sloka, which is the first sloka is normally in the BBT, or in the North Indian edition, is a question by Arjuna about what is the Chetra and what is the Chetra Gya, what is the Chetra means a place, but it means here body, and Chetra Gya means the knower of the body. So he's asking that. But then Krishna goes on, and as he quoted from the South Indian edition doesn't have that question by Arjuna, but it has the answers still by Lord Krishna, and so therefore there's a difference in the numbering, as I said. So he said that it's verse 13, 7 to 11. And if you look in the BBT Gita, it'll be verses 13, 8 to 12. Okay, so what are those verses? Those verses start amanitvam, adambitvam. These are all the Atma Gunas. So the Atma Gunas are what? Humility, pridelessness, non-violence,
Right.
tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement from children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, which Krishna already talked about a lot of these things previously in the Gita, but he's just summing it all up. Constant and unalloyed devotion to God, aspiring to live in a solitary place. Solitary place normally means a spiritual place. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's nobody there, but the persons who are there are conducive persons for Vaishnavism, or conducive for love of the Lord. Yes, you don't want to live.
Right.
You don't live around a lot of people who are atheists, or people who are inimical towards the Lord. Detachment from the general mass of people. Well, that's very similar to the other things, living in a solitary place. Accepting the importance of self-realization, philosophical search of the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there is ignorance. So we were discussing this morning also in Gita Sangraha class, that we're covered by ignorance, and the Atma Gunas are already there. The word Atma means the Jivatma. Okay, the word Atma can mean Jivatma, Paramatma, right? The Paramatma is the supreme soul, the Jivatma is the individual soul. So, of course, Vishishta Dvaita and all the Vaishnava philosophies, we believe that there's a difference between this individual soul and the supreme soul. But the supreme soul has these qualities also. The supreme soul has all good qualities, right? So he has all Paramatma Gunas, let's say. They're the Atma Gunas for the Paramatma. He has all this detachment and all these good qualities. We have also got those qualities, but right now they're covered because of our ignorance. So simply the first step is to get rid of the ignorance by means of what? Okay, so Krishna suggests different things: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, specifically Jnana Yoga. By just working, of course, Karma Yoga, it's possible to come to realizations. By Jnana Yoga, you can read about the theory of the Atma Gunas and things. But ultimately, by devotion, you're going to feel these things are going to emerge when you get rid of this ignorance that's covering you. So I don't think there's any extraneous there's no extraneous effort that has to go into adopting all these things, or cultivating. Let's say cultivating all these Atma Gunas, because they're Atma Gunas, they're qualities of the soul, they're natural qualities of the soul. So when one comes to realize his true state as a servant of God, all those things will naturally come out like that. So we don't have to separately endeavor for those things. The separate endeavors would be Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So we don't have to separately endeavor for those things, but they will come. They will come. So there's a difference between, this is also a difference between understanding what it means in Charma Sloka. Sarva Dharmam Prityaja means give up all those things, give up the things, give up certain things, give up the paths of self-effort. But having, it's not here, it's not that he's saying adopt these things, or try to adopt these things, or try to get these things. He's saying these things will occur, they'll come out. There's a difference between an order to do something that has to be achieved, right? Or simply to achieve that thing, or having it, we can say having achieved that state of mind, all the Atma Gunas reveal themselves. So no separate effort has to actually be made, right? The Atma Gunas are there, and when we come to the realization of our true nature as servants of God and dependent on God, the different nine different relationships that are explained about that the soul has with God, then those will automatically manifest. But okay, so the first step is in this would be to go to the Gita, look at those verses, see those things, and realize that these are our true Atma Gunas, these are the true qualities of the soul. We don't have to adopt any means of self-effort to do that, or even property. It's the Lord Himself who is going to allow those things to manifest from us, and it's the love of Him, that's going to do that. How to actually cultivate that love? The moksha is nothing but service. So as long as we're in this body, and even if we attain to Sri Vaikuntha and through moksha, after moksha, then kainkari goes on, or service goes on. So the first, in the 95th sutra, what he says about that is he says, okay, so he quotes from Pei Alwar. Pei Alwar was one of the first Alwars. Okay, chronologically, there are 3 Alwars that were born before Kali Yuga, and they were called Ayonajas, which means they didn't take birth from any mother, right? So they're said to have taken birth from different lotus flowers in ponds in different places, in Kanchipuram, in Mahabalipuram, and in Chennai, in these 3. And their names are Pogai Buddha and Pei Alwars. So the third Alwar is Pei Alwar. So Pei Alwar wrote something called Tiruvandadi, Tiruvandadi, and in that he said, centering your thoughts on the Lord is eschewing all contact with women, meaning things that are desirable, material things that are desirable. So the example given here is women. For a man, maybe that's desirable. For others, whatever's desirable is like he was saying, directing the mind towards the sacred text, meaning the Sakshara mantra, we could say, or it could be towards the meaning of the Vedas. Directing the mind towards the sacred text after humbling oneself at the feet, touched by the heads of the gods, meaning the feet of what he said was Mal. The word Mal in Tamil means Vishnu. So, but normally we say Tirumal. So it's another, just like we have this Perumal, Tirumal. Tirumal also means Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayana, Sriman Narayana. And he specifically says the Lord of the Hills, because in the ancient Tamil culture, they had these ideas of God. There was the god of Vishnu is the god of hills. So just like today, we go to many holy places in India, and they have temples on hills like that. Normally, the hill stations or the hill temples are temples of Vishnu, like that. There's a few exceptions, of course. There is in Tamil Nadu, there's some hill stations which have temples to Murugan, whatever. But Kartikeya. But mostly, like Tirupati is a very famous, the Lord of the 7 hills. So Lord Srinivasa or Balaji is the Lord in Tirupati. So normally when people see this Lord of the Hills, they think of Tirumal. Tirumal means to Tamil, Lord of the Hills. And it specifically, when you say that in South India, people think of Balaji because he's up there on the top of the hill. But you know, there are other hilly places, sacred places which are hills. Hills are of course, going up on the top of the hill is and meditating. This is common in many cultures around the world because people think that they're closer to God. God's in heaven, and so if I go up on top of the hill, it's the mountains themselves are considered sacred, and in so many ways. So we have that also in Quranic literature, that many mountains are considered sacred, holy places. So a lot of times the holy places are either places of purification, like rivers or the ocean, right? Places of purification, or places very high up physically high up like that. So these are all analogous to holy places, but there are holy places which are actually in those places, but we can think of them as a holy place, as any place which is close to the Lord, which brings us close to the Lord, or where we think we're closer to the Lord. So bathing in holy rivers, bathing in the ocean, going to the top of a mountain, being closer to God. That we can also think like that, even if it's not a specifically Tirupati or the Ganges or whatever, the Kaveri River, holy river. Okay, so that was the first example they gave, that if you do that, if you think of the Lord like that, and don't, basically it's just a change of thought. What did Prabhupada say? Krishna consciousness, right? Being conscious of God, okay? Being conscious of God. And here Payawar is saying that. Be conscious of God rather than be conscious of all those material things that you want. Be conscious of God, and that's the way to direct yourself towards God, and that itself is service to God, right? Just like this in Bhakti Yoga, we have Navada Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Parasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyamanam, Minivedanam. Well, Smaranam is one of those things. So just thinking of God is Bhakti. Just thinking of God is devotion to God. So if we just think of God as much as possible, then those Atma Gunas will come out. That's what he's saying. So Payalwar, that was from the quote from Payalwar and Tiruvandadi by Payalwar. And then he said that there was from some Samhita, but he couldn't say exactly which Samhita it was from. So probably a Pancharatra Samhita, which says that whoever is impassioned with the Supreme Atman and detached from other things other than the Supreme Atman. So this very simple statement of detach yourself from material things and attach yourself to the lotus feet of God, and that's all you have to do. That's all basically you have to do. So again, the Lord himself is the upaya, or the means to liberation, or the means to perfection. Okay, so then the third example they gave was from in Sutra 95 was from Namalwar, Namalwar's Tiruvaimoli, 4.9.10. I avoid desiring gratification through the five sense organs, which wander about seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, and I avoid the pleasure of that rare knowledge, difficult to measure, the negligible bliss of the self-isolated liberation, kaivalya, right? So not only is he giving up normal sense gratification, or normal sensory things, which we all want to gratify the senses. We all want to see good things, hear good things, touch good things, smell good things, and taste good things, right? And we want to not see, hear, touch, smell, or taste bad things, right? So he includes in that kaivalya. Kaivalya, the word kaivalya means isolation, and there's slightly different understandings of this by different people, even amongst the northern and southern schools of Sri Vaishnavas. Kaivalya is understood a little bit differently, but basically it's isolation. It's like being in solitary confinement. Imagine you're in the jail. The material world, oftentimes people refer to the material world as being like a prison, and we're imprisoned here because of our ignorance. And once we attain knowledge, we attain liberation, and we get to the outside, which is the real world, or Sri Vaikuntha, the Lord's world. So like that. So right now we're in this prison, and there are some people, right? They're in prison, and in prison, it's a very horrible, horrible situation because you're associating with all these other criminals. You're a criminal, and all these other criminals you're associating with. So that's horrible. And so there's a lot of times people are in prison and they're afraid because they're with all these other criminals. So what happens to that person is he's so afraid that he does something he can't get out of the prison actually, but he does something to get himself put in solitary confinement. So then he gets put in solitary confinement, and he thinks that's good because because he doesn't have to deal with the other criminals anymore, and he just has to think about himself. So he's there by himself. So sometimes people do that. They want to actually get themselves put in solitary confinement because they're having so many other troubles dealing with the other prisoners. So so this is a sort of an idea of what Kaivalya means. Kaivalya is considered, according to the Sanskrit dictionary Amarkosha, it's a synonym for liberation, for moksha. And of course, for Sri Vaishnavas, moksha is considered to be kainkarya, or actual service, active service. So our idea of moksha is active service to the Supreme Lord, and means a relationship with Him and with other persons. Right? In the Vedas, in the Rig Veda, it says, Tad Vishno Paramam Padam Sada Pasyanti Surayaha. Pasyanti Surayaha. The word Pasyanti means they see. Surayaha. Surayaha means who sees? It means the devotees, the suras. There's suras and asuras. The asuras are those who are not devotees. We sometimes translate asura as demon, right? And suras as demigods, or as, but actually the suras are just the godly people, and the asuras are the ungodly people, let's say. So the suras, they're in Vaikuntha, and they're seeing Lord Narayana. And here it's said about Kaivalya is isolation. So it's like being in solitary confinement. You're not actually seeing Lord Narayana. And therefore you don't have that relationship with Him. Because remember, seeing Him means that you're going to remember Him. And remembering Him is bhakti. So it is actually a form of kainkarya. It's a form of, whether you're actually, fanning or offering Him something, or whether you're actually doing it or not, just by seeing Him, that bhakti is there. So when you don't see Him, when you're in isolation, that is called kaivalya. So normally in the Vedic scriptures, in the Upanishads, sometimes it's said kaivalya is equal to moksha, but it's a very lesser type of moksha. It's okay. So if we had to call it moksha at all, if we could to call it liberation, why would we call it liberation? Why would we call solitary confinement liberation? A prisoner in a jail, he might consider solitary confinement to be a type of liberation, but he's not actually liberated. He's not actually paroled. He's not actually outside. He hasn't gotten free from the prison, but he's just isolated himself. Now there's a differentiation in the concept of kaivalya between the Vadagalais and Tengalais. And as far as I remember, maybe we'll have to check this up, but the Vadagalai idea is very much like the Gaudiya idea, that it's more like a solitary confinement, and it's actually here within the material world, this isolation or kaivalya, and it's not really a true form of liberation, and then you have to come back, because you have to come back to this material world and attain real liberation. So it's only a temporary thing. Whereas the Tengalai say, no, because the scriptures say it is moksha, it's a permanent thing, this isolation, more or less a dead end. You go to solitary confinement, you never really get out, but at least you're not suffering, because so therefore you have bliss because you're not suffering. So here we have a concept. Somebody's suffering. The people in this material world, they're all in ignorance. They're in jail. They're suffering. They're with all the other prisoners, and they're suffering. Then you have a person in solitary confinement. He's not suffering. He's not really suffering like he was when he was with all the other prisoners. So he's just confined, and he's enjoying being alone, being by himself. So that is the bliss of, because even the self has some The self is Satchit Ananda. There is some Ananda. There's some bliss in the self. There's some bliss in the self. But that bliss is not the greatest bliss. The greater bliss is when the soul is actively involved in service to God. Pasyanti Surayaha in the Vedas. Vishnu Yat Paramam Padam, in Vishnu Padam, right? In Parama Padam, Vaikuntha. So that person that's an intermediate stage. Okay, and then you have moksha. Moksha where there's unlimited knowledge, unlimited bliss, like this, because one is completely free from ignorance and one is in his natural position, fully understanding these 9 relationships that the soul has with God and serving the Supreme Lord as his servant, which is our natural position. So what Namala is saying there in Tiruvaimoli, he's saying that all of those things are inferior, and what I really want is to have your standing in the delightful company of your consort with you, who has charming bangles. I've now attained your sacred feet. So the idea is that is the ultimate. The ultimate is to come into personal contact with the Supreme. So it's very interesting. I think we need to do some more. Oh, and so the Tengalai idea of Kaivalya is a permanent situation. So I'm not sure whether, of course, the whole idea of calling it a permanent situation is because if it's equated with any type of moksha, you cannot come back from it, because in the Vedanta Sutras, the very last sutra in the Vedanta Sutra says, "No return, no return." So if Kaivalya is a type of moksha, then there's no return, no return. That's the argument of the Southern School of Tengalai about not returning from Kaivalya. I think we have to do a little bit more. I'm inclined to accept the Wadagai version a little bit more than the Tengalai version on this one, but we have to look more. I have to look more into the subject. And also, we were discussing in Gita Sangraha class the other day about isolation, because what happens? Does the Lord pervades everything? The Lord pervades everything. So does the Lord also pervade the soul? If the Lord pervades the soul, if the Paramatman pervades the Atman, then there cannot be actually technically any Kaivalya. There cannot be any isolation. We can never be isolated, actually, if the Lord is pervading us. So if the Lord's pervading us, it's just a matter of not recognizing him being there. So in the other example given in the Upanishads, the 2 birds in the tree, there's a green tree, which is more or less the body, and there are 2 birds in the tree. So you see a tree and it's green, there's a lot of foliage, and there are 2 green birds in the tree. You don't see the birds because you only see the body. We only see the body, right, with our eyes, with our material eyes. So we don't see the Atman and the Paramatman. We don't see the individual self and the Supreme Self within the body. But they're there like 2 birds. So if the birds make noise, like you're walking past a tree and you just see a tree. But when you hear some chirping, you look up and you see, oh, there's 2 birds in that tree. So that the Upanishads say there's 2 birds in the tree. One is the Atman, one's the Paramatman, one's the Self, one's the Supreme Self. And how they're acting and interacting, that's explained more in the Upanishad. So the question is, if the Supreme Self is always there with the Self, how can there be actual isolation? So we need to look into that subject a little bit more to understand what it means. But if it is, I explained. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, and I said, okay, so I'll give you an example of how this could work. Right? I am with you. I'm standing. The 2 birds are there in the tree. They're looking at each other. But if one bird turns around, if the individual self turns around, turns his back on the Supreme Self, if you turn your back and you look the other way, it's a type of isolation. It's a type of isolation. you're not actually isolated because the other bird is right there behind that bird. The Paramatma's always there. So it's not really isolation. We don't consider, if somebody was to say, oh, there's two people in a room, well, one person is isolated. No. If they're both in the room, then one, you can't say either of them is isolated. But if one person turns his back on the other person, he's trying to isolate himself. Now, the question to be asked of different people, and I want to ask this question and I want to get more of an answer for it, is it really possible for the individual self to completely isolate himself from the Paramatman or God? If God's everywhere, if the Supreme Lord is all pervasive, how can one actually isolate oneself? In that case, there can be no kaivalya. You understand? So it's very interesting. But anyway, it's just a little bit of a sidetrack, because the point here is Nama was rejecting that. And Vaishnavas also, we mostly reject that, like that. But we have to understand that the scriptures or the Vedas and the Upanishads, they do talk about this type of this. There's different types of liberation, and most of them are a type of personal liberation. But this is a type of impersonal liberation, or it's considered impersonal liberation. But it means isolation.